Hello and welcome to the Dot Connector. Well, it's been another week in which the Trump regime has been going on and on about taking over Greenland. So what's the reason? What's behind it all? What's behind the threats to Panama, Mexico, Canada, in terms of the 51st state? Because it's not what they're telling you. And this is Trump giving you the bullshit version this week. We'll get Greenland, yeah, 100%. No, I never take military force off the table. But I think there's a good possibility that we could do it without military force. We have an obligation to protect the world. This is world peace. This is international security. Yawn. And I have that obligation while I'm president. No, I don't take anything off the table, including military force, to take over Greenland. So this was his vice president this week, J.D. Vance, in Greenland. Now, he's the political protege of a guy called Peter Thiel. And Peter Thiel is a guy who started a company, in fact, it was seed funded by the CIA, called Palantir, which provides the intelligence community and the military with surveillance technology and data processing technology for surveillance. And he's also on the steering committee of the Bilderberg Group, which is mega globalist, as they call it, when his protege, J.D. Vance, is supposed to be an anti-globalist. And Vance has many business connections also to Peter Thiel. So Vance and his wife were supposed to visit Greenland this week and meet the people. But no Greenlanders wanted to meet them. And they ended up visiting a US military base. So here's Vance with the troops behind him as a prop, as always, giving you the bullshit version of why the United States, the Trump regime, wants to take Greenland.
Well, the president said we have to have Greenland, and I think that we do have to be more serious about the security of Greenland. We can't just ignore this place. We can't just ignore the president's desires, but most importantly, we can't ignore what I said earlier, which is the Russian and Chinese encroachment in Greenland. We have to do more. Now, what the president said in his State of the Union address, and he was very clear about this, is we respect the self-determination of the people of Greenland. But my argument again to them is I think that you'd be a lot better coming under the United States security umbrella than you have been under Denmark's security umbrella. Because what Denmark's security umbrella has meant is effectively they've passed it all off to brave Americans and hope that we would pick up the tab. We're simply saying to the people of Greenland, when the president says we've got to have Greenland, he's saying this island is not safe. A lot of people are interested in it. A lot of people are making a play. We know that America cares about the security of this island for the sake of the people of Greenland, but also for the sake of the national security interests of the United States of America. So our message is very simple. Yes, the people of Greenland are going to have self-determination. We hope that they choose to partner with the United States because we're the only nation on earth that will respect their sovereignty and respect their security, because their security is very much our security, as these brave Americans show.
Okay, there's the lies. So what's the real reason they want to grasp Greenland into their lair? Well, have a look at this map. This is a map of a group of countries they called the Technate, which Elon Musk's grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, was involved in creating when he was the major player, or a major player at least, in a group called Technocracy Inc. in the 1930s. And it was operating, this Technocracy Inc., in Canada and the UK. Now note that this technate runs from the north of South America, including Venezuela, up through Panama, which Trump has been threatening, the United States, Canada, which Trump wants to be the 51st US state, and, yes, Greenland. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. And this technocracy, what it envisaged, what its ideology demanded, was for an end to democracy, an end to the public having a vote, even in theory, over who rules them, and for government to be taken over by technocrats, bureaucrats, scientists, medical people who, I guess, would come under this all-encompassing word, experts. And they would decide what happens in a country and through a world government in the world. And that sounds remarkably like what I was talking about in last week's Dot Connector, which is this ideology being followed and supported by people like Peter Thiel, called the Dark Enlightenment, which, what does that want? Oh yes, that wants an end to democracy, an end to voting, and for countries to be ruled, ultimately the world government to be ruled, by a monarch, as they call him, but not necessarily a royal monarch, someone like a CEO of a corporation that runs the company like a corporation. And that is what technocracy wants, and it's what the Dark Enlightenment wants, and it's being followed by the Trump regime. This is what's really going on. So who was this guy, Joshua Haldeman, this grandfather of Elon Musk? And this is Chris McGreal. Now, he was the Guardian's Johannesburg correspondent in the last years of apartheid, and he's studied the history of the Haldeman-Musk family, and he's speaking here on Democracy Now! About Joshua Haldeman and his wife.
Originally, the grandparents have no connection to South Africa. They're born and grew up in Canada. And in the 1930s, the grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, he's head of the Canadian branch of a US movement called Technocracy Incorporated. And Technocracy Incorporated is essentially a movement to overthrow democratic government in the United States and have technocrats, but big businessmen in many ways, come in and run the country. That's partly a reaction to FDR's election and New Deal and massive reforms that he's introduced in the United States.
So from Canada, they would help to launch a coup against FDR?
No, Canada had its own branch of this movement to overthrow the government in Canada. Haldeman heads that branch. And through the 1930s, it takes on increasingly fascist overtones. They start wearing grey uniforms, modelled on the Nazi brown and black shirts. And so when Canada declares war on Germany in 1939 alongside Britain, the movement is banned because it's clearly sympathetic to Hitler. Then Haldeman is arrested.
Elon Musk's grandfather.
Elon Musk's grandfather is arrested. They find documents sympathetic to the Nazis and other subversive documents inside his house, and he is sent to prison for a few months and then remains on essentially a subversion watch list for the rest of the war. Yeah, so he's basically regarded as a Nazi sympathizer, a fellow traveler.
So is it really a coincidence that the Trump-Musk regime, as it is at the moment, is following pretty much the same direction that Joshua Haldeman wanted with Technocracy Inc. I mean, what is Elon Musk except an unelected technocrat imposing what he wants upon the government, yes, but actually 350 million Americans. He's a technocrat. It's what his grandfather envisaged. How long Musk will survive with the temperamental Trump is another thing, but that's how it is at the moment. And Musk's grandfather, Haldeman, was certainly a supporter of Hitler, according to McGreal, and according to documents found at Haldeman's house when they raided it. And he was also an enthusiastic supporter of apartheid.
Well, he was certainly on the record in his support for apartheid. Very vividly so, yes. And he said that that's why he'd moved to South Africa from Canada in 1940, was in support of it. Now, the grandfather himself is killed a few years later in a plane crash, but it's not known what Elon Musk's grandmother's personal views of Forster particularly were, but they were both avid supporters of the apartheid system, and the grandmother lived for a number of years afterwards.
What's also interesting is that a group of technocrats who were either born or had big connections to South Africa ended up together in the United States and the whole Silicon Valley extravaganza. There's Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, David Sachs, who's been named by Trump as his AI and crypto czar, and Roloff Botha. And they came together to become what's been dubbed the PayPal Mafia. Now, all, as I say, have South African connections, and 3 were born in South Africa. And Roloff Botha, the grandson, he is, of Roloff Frederick Pick Botha, as he was called, the last foreign minister of South Africa under apartheid. And Peter Thiel was born in Germany, but went to school in Johannesburg before moving to Southwest Africa, it's now called Namibia, and then on to settle in the United States. And at this point, Chris McGreal picks up the story.
At that period, though, one of the things you see is that Peter Thiel, another member of the PayPal Mafia, very close friend of Musk, he had been at school in Johannesburg, but his father gets a job on a uranium mine near Swakopmund in what is then Southwest Africa. And so Peter Thiel moves there as a child and goes to school there. And the thing to know about Southwest Africa, the reason it was separate from South Africa, is that it had been a German colony until the end of the First World War. Then it becomes falls under South Africa's mandate, partly because at that point South Africa was a British colony. When South Africa becomes a republic in the 60s, it hangs on to Southwest Africa and it becomes a South African colony. But the population, big part of the population was of German ancestry. And you could, I remember going to Windhoek in the early 90s, and the main thoroughfare through Windhoek was called Hermann Goeringstrasse, named not after the Luftwaffe chief, but after his father, who had been a governor of German Southwest Africa. in Swakopmund, it was even more extreme. It was notorious for many, many years, really into the 80s and 90s, as a hotbed of open support, continued support for the Nazis and for Hitler. The New York Times has a story from the mid-70s of a reporter pulling up at a gas station to get his car filled with gas, and the attendant openly giving a Nazi salute and saying Heil Hitler to him. You could go to curio shops in Swakopmund and they would sell Nazi-themed mugs and flags and things, and they openly celebrated Hitler's birthday every May. Thiel went to a German school there, so that's the atmosphere he grows up in. His father is an official on a uranium mine there, and the interesting thing about the uranium mine, amongst many other things, is that it supplied part of the uranium to develop the South African atomic bombs in the 1970s, which were developed in league with Israel. Now, part of the deal with Israel was that South Africa would deliver yellowcake uranium to Israel. We don't know where the yellowcake came from. It may have come from that Swakopmund area mine, or it may have come from somewhere else in South Africa. But South Africa was shipping yellowcake to Israel at the same time, because it too was developing nuclear weapons.
So is it really a coincidence again that these guys with a big South African connection then all come together in the United States and work together in this Silicon Valley arena? And once more, is it a coincidence that Musk's grandfather and what he wanted, this technate, fits the countries being targeted by the Trump-Musk regime? Well, here's a headline. Here's why Musk, Bezos, Gates, and Thiel really all want a piece of Greenland. While recent excitement about the vast frigid island has puzzled me, says the writer, Silicon Valley sources who take credit for the idea of buying Greenland view it as deeply tied to America's ambitions in space and information technology, especially concerning AI. Here we bloody go. I've been going on and on since the Trump regime started to come together during the election campaign about the fact that the real focus is creating an AI-controlled society with ultimately a fusion of humans and artificial intelligence. And the targeting of Greenland absolutely fits that. So the writer says they also, the Silicon Valley sources, see it as a critical play for the future, as one source put it. Notable tech figures have shown varying degrees of support. Elon Musk is all for purchasing Greenland. And Peter Thiel backs the idea of establishing an autonomous colony on the island. I'll come to that in a second. Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates have advocated for mining projects because of the wealth of natural resources like rare earth minerals critical for high-tech manufacturing. Now, note that the deal that Trump wants with Zelensky in Ukraine is control of their rare earth minerals. And they're not Zelensky's resources, they are the people of Ukraine's resources. But they want them for this AI technocracy. The writer says it's roughly 1,800 miles from New York City to the capital nuke of Greenland. where freezing temperatures offer hospitable climates for energy-intensive data centers. Take what's needed for the US to maintain information technology dominance, data storage, and computing power deployment, says Tom Dans, former commissioner of the US Arctic Research Commission. Greenland, he says, offers abundant potential energy, strategic metals and minerals, and proximity to key US population centers, all in a highly controllable environment. And while the idea of annexation gained traction in Silicon Valley nearly a decade ago, the writer says, and in part this was because of startup companies backed by Peter Thiel. One of them involves a city they want to build in Greenland called Praxis, which is aimed to be a futuristic autonomous city in Greenland. And the vision of taking over the country has now been expanded. And tech's role in keeping the dream of Greenland alive, says the writer, is reflected in President Trump's pick for ambassador to Denmark. Denmark, the current overseer of Greenland. And his pick is Ken Howry. And he just happens to be another member of the PayPal mafia. And he co-founded the Founders Fund, an investment fund, with Peter Thiel, and is a friend of Elon Musk. And in Trump's first term, Howry served as ambassador to Sweden, gaining insight into the Arctic Circle's security and geopolitical importance. The global cult plays the long game. Now, the sheer arrogance of the Trump regime was captured in these remarks on Fox News by an absolute Trump worshipper called Jesse Waters.
Greenland might not be the best place for a Trump golf course, but Silicon Valley and billionaires like Musk, Bezos, and Peter Thiel think Greenland's landscape will put us ahead in the AI arms race because we can park our data centers up there and keep them cool. It's not that far away from New York City, has minerals galore, and it keeps the Russians and Chinese from dominating the Arctic, the new superpower ice rink. But this isn't about being selfish. This is also about love. And being friendly to the world is what got us in this mess. We're not in high school. We don't need friends. Every country puts their interest first. And when our interests align, we can do business. And when they don't, that's life. If we have to burn down a few bridges with Denmark to take Greenland, we're big boys. We dropped A-bombs on Japan, and now they're our top ally in the Pacific. We may have to burn a bridge to build a big, beautiful new one to the next generation. America's not handcuffed by history.
Sure it is, Jesse. Sure it is. Now, Trump's actions since he came to office for the second time absolutely mirror the technocracy structure of government and the Dark Enlightenment form of government. And that's because he, as one man, has been machine gun firing executive orders, which, when he signs them, become law of the land, absent some judicial challenge. And he's been boasting this week that how many that he's signed in a very short time. We go on day after day with more of these executive orders and threats in all directions. And he posts as if we're meant to cheer when he's signed 107 executive orders in 67 days. And what that means is that one man is constantly changing the laws governing the lives of 350 million Americans and affecting the lives of many others around the world. And at the same time, these threats are going out in all directions, not least this one against Iran. US builds up forces in Middle East as Trump threatens to bomb Iran. Peacemaker president. The United States is deploying more forces to the Middle East after President Donald Trump threatened to bomb Iran if it does not reach a new deal on its nuclear program. The announcement by the US Department of Defense that it is deploying additional forces in the Middle East is an indication, the article says, both of the growing tensions and the possibility of preparations for a potential strike against Iran's nuclear program. While Trump has said he would prefer negotiations, Iran has ruled out direct talks while it's under what it calls maximum pressure, a maximum pressure campaign. The military buildup could be in part posturing, but could also be preparations for a strike. So we just add this together. Airstrikes in a very short time since he came to the White House again. Airstrikes in Somalia and Yemen. Threats to a list of countries, including Iran, Panama, Canada, Greenland. The plan, he says, to remove Palestinians from Gaza to other countries, while supporting Israel, not least with weapons, to continue to bomb Gaza in an effort to force these people out. And we're supposed to believe this is the peacemaker president. And can we just see that we live in one-party states, and while one may seem to be of the right and one may seem to be of the left, they're actually serving ultimately in the shadows the same master, seeking the same end. And if we don't see that, we get pulled into, let's support the Democrats against the evil Trump, and let's support Trump against the evil Democrats. And so it goes on. And I saw this article this week on the Activist Post website, headed the Deep State Revelations Circle. And it's interesting, he's quoting people here that from the inside have seen that politicians aren't actually running the show. It says people like Dominic Cummings, chief advisor to former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, have a habit of revealing things we're not supposed to know about how government operates. They often expose the motives and acts of what many these days call the deep state. And he quotes here in the article, quotes by Dominic Cummings made in December, just gone, of 2024, in which he said this, from his insider experience of government. So if you think of two roles, right? The Foreign Secretary of Great Britain and the Private Secretary in the Prime Minister's office responsible for foreign affairs. An official whose name has never been in the newspapers. That person was like 10 times more powerful and important than the Foreign Secretary of State. This is something which I think, said Cummings, people don't really realize. It's part of the whole system and how the whole system has become fake. Become for a long time. So you have a fake meritocracy, fake responsibility, and then fake cabinet government. It's all nonsense. The cabinet is just like a staged theatre. And that is what the Trump cabinet will be, controlled from the shadows in terms of its direction and its policy by a force you never see, but one with big connections to Israel for sure. So the article also quotes Cummins when he was speaking at a 2021 parliamentary committee hearing, in which he said this: in March of 2020, I started getting calls from various people saying these new mRNA vaccines could well smash the conventional wisdom. What Bill Gates and people like that were saying to me and to others in number 10 Downing Street was, you need to think of this much more like the classic programs of the past, the Manhattan Project in World War II, the Apollo program. That's essentially, said Cummins, what we did. But he went on to describe how, quote, people like Bill Gates and that kind of network, in other words, of oligarchs, were telling the UK government what its COVID emergency response should be. In other words, says the writer, Cummins was confessing that the general public's perception of government is all nonsense. Government is just stage theatre to keep us believing in the fake political system. And the article also quotes Liz Truss. Now, she is the shortest serving Prime Minister in British history, who says that she was similarly shocked when she realized the Prime Minister of Britain is not in control. You remember what happened with Liz Truss, and I'm no supporter of her, but she was voted to be leader of the Conservative Party, thus she became Prime Minister because the Conservative Party were the government. And she defeated a guy called Rishi Sunak. But Rishi Sunak was the cult's choice for British Prime Minister. So what happened is when Truss came in, all hell broke loose financially, in the markets, as they call them, and she was ousted and replaced by, guess who? Yep, Rishi Sunak. So this is what she says about her experience. What I found out when I got to number 10 is that if I got to the top, or what she thought is if I got to the top of the tree, I would be able to implement those conservative policies. What I discovered is that I was not holding the levers. She was Prime Minister. The levers were held by the Bank of England, brackets, cult-owned, and the Office of Budget Responsibility, brackets, cult-owned, and they were not held by the Prime Minister or the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Finance Minister, in Britain. And this is why I get frustrated when I see people who've come into the alternative media in recent times saying that actually the deep state is not kind of organized. It's kind of an alignment of shared interests. Absolute bloody nonsense. It's highly organized and fiercely compartmentalized so that people playing their part in making it happen don't realize what the game really is. So I hope that's given some background to the fact that what we're being told about Greenland and all these other countries they're targeting is not actually the real reason for it happening. Okay, so that's the public version of the or the public section of the Dot Connected this week. And if you want to see the rest, and there's a lot more to come, then go to iconic.com after 5 p.m. UK time every Thursday.